All right,
Okay,
we're all set. We're recording right now.
all right,
All right. So I want to thank you
okay,
for letting me interview you.
okay.
And I want this to be real casual. If there's any questions you don't want to answer, just say I don't want to answer that. Or
Okay.
if there's something you want to add on, just add on to it.
Okay.
In that time. So
We're ready to go?
we're ready to go.
Okay, what do
Okay.
you want to know?
So what I was going to start out to, when were you born?
I was born 1922,
1922. Okay.
February the 7th.
February the 7th. Did your parents ever tell you anything about your birth? Any stories about when you were born? Or?
Yes, I was born in the old cookhouse that used to be, years ago on Glenhaven Road, there used to be a mill company. They cut down the old redwoods for lumber. There's no lumber mill there. Well, the house that I was born in was an old cookhouse for the lumber company.
And what city was this in?
This was in Soquel, California.
Oh, okay.
And it was, I think that lumber mill probably was there in the 1800s, but I don't know exactly the date that they were there.
Uh-huh.
But I know that my mom came over to Ellis Island in 1910. My dad, I don't remember too much about my dad. I wrote to every port of entry of the United States, and there was nothing that they had recorded. But I think my dad came over probably between 1915 and 1910, before World War One.
And where did he come from?
Then he came from the island of Sardinia,
Oh.
and but he came to this country on an immigration deal. You know, in the old days, in Italy and in the foreign countries, France and all those, they would set up big signs that said "needed men in America" or "needed help in America" or workers.
I didn't know
workers
that.
probably. Yes. See, now I'm telling you some history.
Yes.
And so my dad was born, of course, he was just about like maybe 17 or 18. And he didn't have much education because he was, his uncle was an importer-exporter of fish from the island of Sardinia to the coast of Italy. And they went through Corsica. You know, Corsica is that little country that's in, that island that's right at the end of Spain.
Uh-huh.
Well, anyway, that's where my dad grew up and did, because he was like about 4 or 5 years old, maybe 10 years old, and he was with this uncle of his. So my dad never really got a lot of writing education, or school education, but he did know how to write his name, thank God for that. But anyway, I tried to find a lot about my dad's history. My mom did write to his parents in Sardinia.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was still living, and his sister was still living.
And what year was this?
And this was in the probably through the 1920s and 30s.
Okay.
Because I think that his mother and the sister perished in probably the I would say sometimes in the late 1930s, because
Okay.
his mother was pretty old at that time. I think she was in her 80s or something.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I didn't find too much about the history of my dad, but my mom is a love story. My mom was 21 when she came to this country. She came through Ellis Island.
Did you see her thing in the Ellis Island?
I looked all over for those people that were, you know, they had those kerchiefs on their head and stuff. You know, there were a lot of Polish people. I could tell there was a lot of Polish people. A lot of people from the lower Italy, the Sicilian people.
Okay.
There were a lot of Sicilian men that came to this country and built this country. I didn't know this until I saw it on TV just the other day. There was 2 things that QVC had about the Italians in America.
Uh-huh.
And it was very, very interesting to me, because I didn't know that a lot of the men that came over here were single men, or they left their families over there and came to this country to work on the railroads.
Oh.
That's where my dad started. He started in Mexico. See, and I tried to write to Veracruz. I tried to write to all the ports of entries in Mexico, and nothing. I never got any response at all. Or if I did, it was just, I'm sorry, we don't have any record. So anyway, we always teased my dad. We always teased him that he was put in a barrel and shipped out. Shipped off of the ship onto the sand, onto the what you call it. But anyway, that's another story. But my mom came over here to marry a widower. She knew him from childhood. They lived in a little hamlet close to there. She was from Lucca, Italy. And he was from Porcari, which Porcari is a little hamlet, you know, like we talk about Hollister and Gilroy, you know, probably, but not that far apart. And so anyway, this young man came over to homestead the property that my mom inherited eventually over there in Glen Haven. We had a, ranch, a apple orchard and plum orchard. There were 2 times a year that my folks got money to live on. Okay, anyway, that's another story. But anyway, Mom was a young girl, probably about 20, when Joseph Del Pogetto was here. He came with his folks in the probably in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because he went to school in California.
Okay.
He spoke pretty good English.
Now this is the person that your mom was
This
coming
is
over?
the person that my mother married,
okay.
her first husband.
Oh, okay.
Okay. He was 14 when he came to this country, and of course he went to school here. And he married a girl from San Francisco, which, you know, the Italians are kind of clannish, you know, you have to marry into the family. Well, anyway, he married this young lady, and she didn't like the country. You see, he was away, I mean, where I lived, out there on Glen Haven Road, that's 2 miles from a town, from the town of Soquel. The town of Soquel was nothing but a mud hole at that time. I'm talking about way back in the 1910s, okay? I have pictures of that, but I don't know where they all are. I think they went with my mother's album to my sister, who now has passed away, and God knows where the album went that had all the family pictures in it.
Right.
But anyway, to make a long story short, Mom went over there. Joseph, her first husband, his wife passed away in childbirth. So he was very depressed and everything. His sisters, 2 sisters, were already here in this country. In fact, they lived in Santa Cruz, and their husbands worked at the tannery on River Street. Okay, so they got enough money to send Joseph back to Italy to visit his parents and, you know, kind of get him out of the depression thing. He already had 2 children.
And Joseph is your father?
No, Joseph is not my father. That was my mother's first husband.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, but she had 4 children from him, so I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters that were half sisters and brothers.
I see.
But we never considered them half sisters and brothers. They were always just sisters and brothers.
Gotcha.
Okay, in the Italian family, you don't speak about the children that are from another marriage. But anyway, I'm just giving you a little about my mom first, because then eventually she married my dad. But anyway, in the meantime, my dad worked for the railroad. He was all the way to Nevada, worked on the railroad, and then he came back to Soquel for some reason or another. Don't ask me why. But anyway, he worked for this gardener there on Glen Haven Road, right on what's called, they call Main Street now. He had a home there, and he had a garden, and he had a row crop. So my dad used to get the horse and buggy, and he worked for this man, and he went around and he went from house to house selling the vegetables. The vegetables in those days were vegetables to him.
Okay.
But to us it's vegetables, but to him it was vegetables. Anyway, and that's how he met my mom, because my mom was, by that time, Joseph had passed away. She had 4 children, left her a widow, just died instantly of a heart attack at the dinner table.
No.
So left her out there in the country
How
with the ranch. The apple crop was ready to be picked. Nobody there. So her brothers, her 3 brothers, had already come to this country, but they were working in Tehachapi on the railroad.
Okay.
So anyway, she got a hold of them, and they came, and the 2 brothers helped her collect pick the orchard, the fruit,
Right.
and get it to the packing houses or whatever they did in those days. And then my mom found a fella that would take the ranch on a sharecrop. So that was good, because Mom then moved to Capitola, and she took in washing with the 4 little children.
Okay.
I think my youngest brother was 9 years. Her youngest child was 9, and he was probably about 4 years old, 3 or 4 at the time. The older ones were just in their, just growing up in 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
Because they had them every 2 years,
Okay.
or something like that. The first 2 children were just like 13 months apart, but the other children came 2 years later.
I see.
Anyway, that's the first story of my mom.
Okay.
Anyway, she went to Italy and met Joseph, and Joseph kind of took a liking to her, and they talked, she was a young girl, 19 or 20, and it was exciting to talk to somebody that had been to America. So he asked her when he left, he asked her if she would write to him. So they continued a correspondence, and eventually he asked her if she would come to America and get married with him. So she said yes, and then she came in 1910. That's how she arrived at Ellis Island, took the train from New York all the way to California to San Francisco.
Wow.
Met him and his 2 sisters there. No hanky-panky in those days, And then they were married about 2 or 3 days later, I guess, and by a judge, of course. They didn't marry in church.
So they married right away, huh?
Yeah, they got married right away because, the ranch needed help. And he figured, well, he might as well take his bride out to the country, get her used to it. Oh, my God, she said, Mom, she talking to me. She said to me, oh, Mary, she said, I cried day and night for 4 years. She didn't have any children for 4 years, and with Joseph. And she said, "Oh my God!" She said, "I left that beautiful. I guess they lived in like a 2-3 stories in Italy. They have those. They're like apartments, I guess. I don't know. I've never been there. I think Valerie has, and she knows about it. But the terrazzo floors, the beautiful country. And she comes to this desolate, out there in the country, brush everywhere. The horse and buggy had to go through this little trail, like you moved over into the woods if you met somebody coming the other way. And it was horse and buggy days. Let's put it that way. Okay, I think the first car that was in SoCal was the Cunningham garage. He had, that's when the Ford Motor Company, he had cars there. Okay, well that was later on in the 1920s. Okay,
Right.
But anyway, that's another story. And then Mom, of course, after, as I said, passed away, Joseph passed away, left her a widow. She moved to Capitola, and she took in washing to help herself,
Right.
And my dad happened to be by there, and he, was selling her the vegetables and whatever, lettuce and whatever to make salads or whatever the vegetables were. And so they got to be friendly and whatever, and then my dad and her got together and they got married. Okay. So then Dad moved with her back to the ranch.
And what year did they get married in, do you think?
I think it was 1919.
Okay.
Because my brother was born in 1919.
Oh, okay.
So that was a quick marriage. I mean, this was never spoken about. But hanky-panky went on, I guess. But my mother never said. And they got married in May and figure it out.
Okay.
They got married in May and my brother was born in October.
Uh-huh.
So how many months is that, honey? That's not no 9 months, is it?
Right.
Okay, well, anyway, the first one always comes anytime, they say.
Uh-huh.
That was the old saying. You know, the first one comes anytime. After that, it's always a 9-month baby.
And what was your brother's name?
My brother's name was Angelo.
Okay.
Okay, my brother was born in 1919. Let's see. He was 3 years older than me, and I was born in 22. So 9 and 3 is 12, right? Yeah. So he would have been born in 1919.
Okay.
Okay. And and then, of course, in 1922, I was born. Well, when I was born, my dad wanted to name me Angela. My mom says, no, there's enough angels in the family. We don't need another angel. Because my brother's name was Angela. Okay. So anyway, I got to be named Mary. Actually, my name was M-E-R-I, Mary. It wasn't Mary like in English, M-A-R-Y.
M-E-R-I?
M-E-R-I, in Italian it would have been Mary.
Got it.
See, but in English it's M-A-R-Y.
Okay.
So that's how it got on my my birth certificate and everything. So that's another story because the doctor that brought me into the world and the midwife, because they had midwives in those days. They didn't have the lady came and helped my mom and everything. So anyway, to make a long story short, the doctor forgot to record my birth certificate at the county courthouse in Santa Cruz.
Oh.
But in the meantime, that county courthouse burned down. So there was no more records of me or anybody. So I had a heck of a time during World War II to get my birth certificate, but I did because I went to high school and they got all my records and stuff from that, and then the state of California did my birth certificate from Sacramento and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's another story.
Oh.
And I can tell you a lot of stories. I could probably be here all day, but I won't.
Well, just so you know, I kind of limit these to 2 hours.
All right.
And if you get tired earlier, just say so.
Yeah.
And we can come back and do it some other time.
That's good.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking over here, but I should be probably talking to you.
No, this is
And
good.
anyway, when I was 2 years old, I got really sick. And I was on my deathbed. So they called the priest to give me my last rites.
Wow.
And the doctor, of course. The doctor had given up on me.
Uh-huh.
His name was Dr. Davis. I'll never forget his name. Anyway, he lived in SoCal for many years, and then he passed on, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, he gave up on me. My folks didn't know what to do with me. My fever was like 104, 105, and they couldn't get my fever down. So my mom said to my dad, I'm going to give her a dose of castor oil, the old-fashioned stuff,
I think my mother used to give me that stuff.
I don't know how old you are, but I think the castor oil was probably around in those days, too.
I'm 56.
Oh, yeah, and your Valerie's 55, so figure it out. Anyway, my mom gave me a dose of castor oil, and she said I passed all kinds of colors of the rainbow, and my fever went down, and I survived. So here I am today.
So, do they know what was wrong with you?
They never knew what was wrong with me.
Oh.
My parents were very, very happy that I survived.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why, but they were happy. And then, of course, I grew up with my other older brothers and sisters. And then along the way came my sister. About 5 years later, I had a sister, Lena. She's passed on by now. And then 2 years later, I had a brother, and his name was Paul. And then 2 years later, I had another little brother named Tony. And my mom was 43 by then, and she told my dad that he had to go sleep in the barn. That was it. No more kids.
So how many kids did
So we
she
knew
have
there were
altogether?
9 children.
That's-
There was
that's what I was
nine
counting.
of us all together. There was 4 from her first husband and 5 from my dad.
Wow, what a
And
family.
my dad loved children, and that he was the Pied Piper of. He was the Pied Piper. He loved kids, and kids all took to him. When we had family doings, and there were little kids, oh my God, my dad was in 7th heaven. And my 2 youngest brothers, they didn't know what it was to be spanked or to be chastised or anything. In fact, my next youngest brother, he got on my dad brought him a tricycle, would you believe, in those days. I don't know where he managed to get the money, but he did. And this little guy, Paul, he got on that tricycle, and he went 2 miles, mind you. The post office was on the corner of Soquel Avenue at that time and Main Street, right on the corner. He was down there, and he was having a ball. My folks were tearing their hair out, wondering where he was. But my oldest brother drove at that time. He was 16 or 17, I think, and we did have a car at that time. And so my oldest brother got in the car, and he went down to the town. And here he was laughing and having a great time. And there was this man by the name of Pellegrini. He was deaf-mute, but he could, he could talk, but it was guttural.
Okay.
And he just was having a ball with my brother Paul, of course. Anyway, that was my brother Paul, and ever since then he was a wild little creature. I mean, you couldn't tell him nothing. He knew everything. But anyway, beside the point. Anyway, I grew up with 5 other brothers, and my 2 oldest sisters. My oldest sister married in 1927. I was 5 years old. My new brother-in-law baptized me at the St. Joseph Catholic Church in Capitola.
Okay.
So I do have a record of my baptism. I found that out when I was in the 80s, when I finally did my communion and confirmation.
Okay.
But anyway, that's beside the point too. Anyway, let's see, what else do you want to know?
So you grew up in Soquel.
Yeah.
And how long did you stay in Soquel?
I was when I married when I graduated from high school in 1941. My bus driver, excuse me, he's gone now. But Mr. Wells was the bus driver that drove the bus up in Glenhaven Road and all over the place, dropping off kids from the high school. Anyway, he asked my folks if I could come and stay at his house because he had 2 little girls. His wife had taken off with some man, left him with the 2 little children. So he asked my folks if I could come and stay at his house and take care of the 2 little girls. So my mom said yes, I could do it because I was at home. I wasn't doing anything.
And how old were you at that time?
I probably was 19.
19, okay.
Yeah, because I graduated from high school at 19. Because of my illness and everything, I didn't start grammar school until I was 6 years old, almost 7. So it threw me. By the time I got out of high school, I was 19. I wasn't. Most of the girls and boys that graduated with me were probably 17. And some of them, of course, 18. But I was 19. I was one of the oldest in grammar school. I was one of the oldest in junior high, I think, and I was one of the oldest one in high school, in my graduation class I'm talking about. But anyway, yes, I went to Soquel Grammar School there on Walnut Avenue, and I graduated from there in 1937, and then I went to junior high school at Mission Hill Junior High School in Santa Cruz. At that time, we had to go to the junior high first before we went to the high school, because the high school was only a 3-year high school at that time. Now, of course, they're 4 years eventually. But anyway, I spent 2 years there, or what? Eighth grade, let's see, 9th grade there, 9th grade, and then I went over to the high school. So I spent the other 3 years in high school and graduated from high school in 1941.
I see.
So, Then, let's see, I was 19, and I told you I went to work for this man, for
Right.
this bus driver for his children. And then after that, I had an appendectomy. So I was in the hospital,
Uh-huh.
and when I recuperated from that, because in those days they kept you in the hospital for 9 days afterwards or 10 days afterwards. They didn't have to. Nowadays they just operate and send you home, but they
Right.
didn't in those days.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, I was in the hospital for about 9 days, and then I went home. And then this friend of my family's had a produce house in Santa Cruz on Water Street. That went away with the flood. You know, in 1989 was it when they had that big earthquake and flood and everything in
Uh-huh.
Santa Cruz, the river overflowed and all that.
Oh.
Well, anyway, to make a long story, that's the history.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I went to work for Sal. He was my husband. He was actually a shirt-tailed relative of my mother's, on my mother's side of the family.
Okay.
And they lived in, where the heck did they live? San Juan Bautista, I think, at the
Okay.
time. Anyway, to make a long story short, I went to work for Sal for a short time, and then they were taken over by a Marion Brothers, who have they have the produce houses on Taylor and Market Street in San Jose. Well, Johnny Iesa was he was the director. He didn't own it, but he was part of the partner that came to Santa Cruz, and I worked for Johnny 4 years.
Okay.
That was from 19. Let's see, I got it. Oh, in the meantime, let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
I married my husband in 1943. I met him he was stationed at Fort Ord. He had just got back from Hawaii. He had been over there 2 years. And at Fort Ord, his complement, he was in the 3rd Division Infantry. And he had to have an operation on his knee, so he was in the hospital. So the 3rd Division was sent to Africa. And you know, it was completely annihilated almost
Oh, I
by
didn't know
Ramo
that.
over there in Africa.
Hmm.
But anyway, to make a long story short, my husband didn't have to go. But in the meantime, the 44th Division from New York, Engineers Division, was sent out to Fort Ord to make a complement for the 44th Engineers so that they could be sent to Italy. I mean to the European Theater of War.
Okay.
So anyway, when I met my husband, he was stationed in Fort Ord, and we kind of got together. I mean, you know, from how kids do. I mean, young people. And so he asked me to marry him. And
Do you
so
remember
forth.
when you first met him?
Yes, I do remember that very clearly.
Okay.
I was walking on the bridge, on Water Street Bridge, and these 3 Army boys were walking in the back of me, and they were teasing me a little bit.
Uh-huh.
What are you doing? Where are you going? You know how kids do, young people do.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, I was going to go to the Pep Creamery. There was a Pep Creamery in Santa Cruz that made the best milkshakes in the whole world.
Mm.
So I was going there. I had left, the little girls had gone with their dad that night. So I didn't have to take care of them that night. So I just got dressed and I thought, well, I'll just go downtown by myself. I wasn't afraid at those days. I don't know, even though there were a lot of soldiers around and sailors and everything, it didn't
Uh-huh.
bother me too much. I was raised in the country. I was pretty naive, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And but I thought, well, what the hell? I'm going to go. So I was walking along, and these 3 guys were walking in the back of me, and they were just kind of wanting to get introduced, I guess.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, that's how I met my husband.
Oh.
And he was from Indiana.
Oh.
So, you know, that was exciting to me. Gee, I met somebody from another state, you know. I was 19. Oh, God, what did I know? Excuse me. So we ended up talking and having fun. I mean, just talking.
Uh-huh.
We went to the Pep Creamery. We all had milkshakes or whatever they had. I don't remember.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, my husband ended up walking me home.
Okay.
Because the little girls I took care of lived there in Santa Cruz.
I see.
He
How
ended up.
long ago a walk was
Oh
that?
my God! This was in 1942.
Okay.
Yeah, 42. So anyway, we just, kind of fell in love, so the old saying was.
Uh-huh.
And then he got shipped from there to the European theater of war.
Okay.
Okay. No, he didn't, not at first. At first, I'm sorry, he was shipped to the state of Washington, to Fort Lewis.
Uh-huh.
Well, when he got to Fort Lewis, he missed me. Young guys.
Yep.
And so he called me and he said, Mary, I said, I really miss you. And he said, he said, I wish you would come. Yeah, I wish you would come up here. So I packed my bags. My folks were, oh my, don't tell me I was leaving.
Yeah.
Oh no, no. In those days you had to have your brother or your sister with you,
Right.
I said, I'm going, Mom. I love him, I want him, I'm crazy about him, blah, 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 and whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I had, of course, had all the crying jags and everything else, But anyway, they finally said, okay, well, if you really, really care about the guy, go ahead.
Uh-huh.
It's your life. You do what you want. So I packed my bag and I got on the train and I went to Fort Lewis. And we married
Did you,
by the judge.
how,
We didn't get married in church, no.
how long were you there before you got married? Did you?
Not very long.
Not very long?
Not very long.
Okay.
I can't remember now even when it was.
Uh-huh.
I think it was January the 10th. Oh, before he went to Fort Lewis,
Uh-huh.
yes, I was working at Mount I'm sorry, I missed a little bit there.
That's okay.
When we started going together, he was stationed at Fort Lewis. I mean at Fort Ord.
Fort Ord.
Then from Fort Ord, he was shipped up to Marysville because his complement was getting ready to go overseas, but they had to do a lot of other stuff before they went there.
Uh-huh.
And then, so when he was at Marysville, I was working. I went to live with my sister in Stockton, and I got a job at the Port of Stockton.
Uh-huh.
So I worked for the government there. I got a job out there at the Ordnance Depot.
Okay.
At Port, what do they call it? Port of Stockton.